All right, my friend. This One Time in Real Estate, season number 2, episode number
24.
Episode number 24. And as you know the game, I never know the topic until now. Hey, by the way, as a side note, you left your notebook there. By the way, I was not even tempted to look through it.
Really?
A matter of fact, you had it open.
Yeah.
But did you notice it was closed?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, because I didn't want to feel any temptation, even though I'm really interested in knowing what you write in there. You're always taking notes.
Yeah.
Do you actually do anything with those notes? What do you take notes? What can the listeners and viewers learn from because you're a heck of a note taker. Mm-hmm. And I feel good, on some conversations, or some of my, when I'm leading a huddle or something or training, you're over there like a little scribe.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you're not. So should I take it personal that my content training isn't as good sometimes? Tell us about it. What's in there? Why do you do it? And how do you apply it?
Let's see. So I think what happened initially was I remember things better when I write them down. So it was really kind of selfish for myself that I just knew if I was actively listening and I could also write it, the chances of me remembering it would be a lot higher. And that was really important back in the day, especially because I was learning a lot from Mark in a one-on-one setting that I didn't want to have to go back and ask you how to do it again back in the day. So I just would write it all down. Especially becoming chief growth officer is really important that I just wrote it all down. And I had a transcript. So actually at home, I actually had a conversation with Matt about this the other day because I have a volume of notebooks next to my bed that are all of my work notes that I just keep. But it's important. And so sometimes I will go back. For instance, we had some really important meetings Wednesday, and I wrote almost everything that we talked about down because I knew it would be important to have that to write out what it's going to look like moving forward. It's also important. I like to write down quotes people say if I think they're really impactful because I typically will use them for a podcast or I'll use them for something. So I hated leaving my notebook here because I needed to send emails out yesterday and I wanted to have my notebook as a reference to the email and I didn't have it. So I was relying on my memory, but it was fine. But I really like a notebook, and I think it's funny because now that I've been doing it for so long, I really think it's interesting when people come to a meeting without anything to write on or with, because I think, how are you possibly going to remember all of the good stuff that you're about to witness? But again, it's just something that it's really important to me, and I like to have the reference point to be able to go back to as well.
By the way, 2 reference points in the last 3 days about writing things down. So John Cheplak, our real estate coach, did an amazing sales challenge, had Dean Gracioso on. He, word for word, John, wrote down everything Dean said during workouts. He scribed 100%. He listened to the playback, would slow it down. So I'm talking to our real estate coach about that and the retention because he mentioned it in a group setting. And I said, I don't know, John, if you know this, but the segue was I told him, David Goggins, you know him, yes. Right? Yep. Listeners may or may not know, he is one of the fittest human beings in the world, Navy SEAL. There's so much more to talk about him. He has this mindset that when you are at your capacity, you're doing an exercise and you feel like you have nothing left in the tank, you probably are only at about 40%, meaning you have 60% plus left. But here was the segue that talks about you with writing things down. David Goggins has a learning disability, and in order to be a Navy SEAL, you have to do this physical, just challenges that are just crazy. Bring you in the middle of the ocean. They drop you in the middle of the ocean. I think you maybe have arms or legs tied. I mean, just some crazy stuff. You're immersed in the coldest water possible. But the exam is difficult. Mm-hmm. David Goggins failed once or twice. His third time, he said, I'm not going to fail the exam part. He wrote down every single thing from the course. And I think 1,000 pages or more. And he wrote down every single thing. And maybe he wrote it twice. And he passed the exam by writing it down. But again, nothing's by accident.
Yeah.
It's just funny that you left this here. And then I was thinking about that notebook, and you're always writing. And then John Cheplak, brilliant mind in real estate, is writing down everything from Dean Gracia, word for word, by the way.
That's so interesting.
And then it segued to my conversation with John about David Goggins. So there's absolutely something about retaining information.
Yeah.
Now, this also is segued, and I think we maybe have talked about waiters and waitresses. Doesn't impress me. Don't memorize it. Write it down. Write it down. I feel just comfortable. And so that does when you don't write my nuggets down, should I take it personal?
No, definitely not. And actually, just so you know, sometimes when you're speaking about something, it's reminding me of something else. And so if I'm like feverishly writing while you're talking, which happens sometimes, it could be because it prompted me to remember something that we talked about. Because the thing with, I mean, gosh, I don't know, I guess real estate specifically, but probably most lines of work, there's so many good conversations that are had that prompt thoughts, and so you're just like trying to keep them organized and keep them in front of you. So that can sometimes be very helpful for me. So it's I love it actually, and probably another thing to just note for myself was that I would say the preemptive tool that I use that has really kind of led me to the notebook writing was emails. So I would sometimes in my youth, like when I started on the team like 9 years ago, I would write an email and I'd be kind of like, I would write something and maybe send it before I had totally thought through my whole, what my goal was or what just all my thoughts that I had. And I started to then instead take time and I'd like write an email, but I wouldn't send it. And I would just try and like write out all the things that I had, the thoughts that I had, and organize them. And a lot of the time it was kind of weirdly therapeutic, because at the end I'd be like, oh, that's what this is all about. Because you have so many conversations with clients and other agents, and there's so many feelings involved, emotions, and you have to, as an agent, you kind of have to hold them all, and then ideally be able to effectively translate what you need in order to get your ultimate goal accomplished. So that ended up becoming a really great tool for me, and I now do that with a notebook as well. And I'll do like the most important things that I need to do that day, or if I'm really inspired by something, I'll make a note of that. I use stars now so that I know a starred line is really important versus like a dash. And anyway, it's helped me to stay somewhat organized, although I know there's still a long way to go, more improvement to come. So
you actually take your time on emails. Mark Gelman has to be careful, because I'm ready, aim, fire with my emails and texts. That always isn't great though, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, you're actually not. You're pretty good. You may get one at 2 a.m., which happened the other day, and I thought, he hasn't slept today probably, but that's fine. But they're I would say overall pretty great emails. So.
But I love this. Just as a side note, this notebook, I know to you, is just gold. The interesting thing would be to actually how often you're able to review it, digest it. There's so much. The content that if you turn this into a curriculum, mm-hmm. I mean, you have gold all over the place here. So I know that you missed it. Yeah. I know that I closed it up. I didn't read a single thing. But I love to hear your thought process of writing things down and the related, correlated retention,
yeah.
and how it relates to these other two people that we just talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
What else you got for us on the notebook?
Well, let's see. I have this is just another little nugget that I've learned through Failing Forward, because we go to these great masterminds where it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's like 3 days of tons of really great information. You have to learn how to sort out What do I need right now versus what do I still think is great, but maybe that'll be a down the road project that we want to work on. And in the beginning, you should see my notebooks for those, because it was very overwhelming, because it was like there'd be speaker changes and it was just all these great things. So now what I do is I keep a front page of just top ideas, because when you go to enough of these events, people will tell you, just take 3 things. Like, don't think you need to go back and take 82 things you've learned and put them into place for your organization. So I keep a front page that I just say like my best thoughts, best takeaways, best ideas. And then the remaining pages, I don't feel as pressured to have to capture everything line by line, word by word, because it's just you also want to just enjoy it. And then, so anytime I have something that's really a nugget, I pull it from wherever I am in my notebook and I flip to the front page, and I keep it so that I know I only have one page, so this has got to be like really, really good stuff to make it on that page. So this past time we actually were in New York, it ended up being, I don't think I told you this, but a lot of books, because I know I need to get better about just continuing to increase my knowledge and reading. Obviously, David Goggins, like you said, just what a phenomenal book that people reference all the time. If you haven't read it, you're like, I need to read that book. So this time, a lot of it was just books that I was like, I'm making a priority that I'm going to read 3 of these books that have been recommended. But I feel like it makes me a lot more organized. I think it makes me a lot more effective when I come back to be able to segment my notebook in that way. And every time I go to one of those, it's always a new notebook also.
And I appreciate that. I mean, and I think it's moved the needle exponentially on our business, is one meeting I was not at. I think it was in Houston. You came back very excited about Google reviews and the commitment to Google reviews. And just to correlate that, you implemented it. Sometimes as a leader, if you would have come back with 10, 12, 15 items, number one, there's some paralysis by analysis. There's also overwhelm of the team. You have to be so cautious of the team to roll these things out. You want to make sure that there's a return. You actually can come back and say, if we do this, then we will get a return. And I can quantifiably say that Google reviews give us the credibility that we needed, that we didn't have then, even though we have significant credibility. So congratulations on that. But again, I know that you're one that's filtering through with the understanding your responsibility with the organization, that you just can't come back with all these ideas. It causes overwhelm. Plus, if some don't work out and you do 20, you've wasted people's time, your own time and energy. Plus, people remember what doesn't work out. There's some negativity in life. They remember the things that don't work out versus that do. So pick your battles, and you've done and I congratulate you. You've done a good job. So for a reference point, before we wrap this up, because now that we're on video, the listeners and the viewers actually saw you write something down. Would you mind referencing what you wrote down?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you just were talking
What did you actually write? I'm going to interrupt. What word for word, what did you write down?
Oof. So I wrote down, give myself permission to call the ball, because it's really relevant. You wouldn't know, because I haven't talked about this yet, but this will probably end up being our next podcast topic, because it's funny. We had a conversation the other day where you were like, I can't tell you how to run this. You're going to have to tell you. Remember that conversation on Wednesday? And I was just, because another thing with the notebook is you hear things in life over and over. I'm sure everybody can relate to this. You hear things that people say, but it takes the right time for it to actually resonate. Like when the student's ready, the teacher appears, that saying. So like certain points, things resonate, and then you're like, oh, okay. And I've had a lot of that in the last 2 years, where I'm like, wow, now I understand what that really is meaning. So anyway, yesterday was just a really interesting day, because that conversation ended up really hitting me, that it's like I have to have the confidence to say, this is what we need to focus on. And that alone is sometimes challenging. To come back and say, especially at that time, because that was a few years ago, the Google review, but it was I felt conviction that I knew it would be something, and we had already started. It wasn't like it was brand new. We had already had a really nice portfolio of Google reviews at that time. But you knew if we could move the needle even further, it would be a huge, obviously, benefit to the organization. So anyway, it's funny. So I just wrote that down, because it's weird how things happen. Nothing's by coincidence.
I love it. And actually, what's coolest about this is I already gave her our next podcast idea, even though she doesn't know that it's the next podcast idea. Anything else, or are we wrapping this sucker up?
That's a wrap.
All right, let's do this.